"Oh, are you the nanny? Please, take the kids to the guest room in the back." My daughter-in-law's words echoed through the entire living room. The hum of conversation stopped dead. 30 pairs of eyes fixed on me. My son, Richard, let out a loud laugh. Victoria smiled, satisfied, waiting for me to obey like just another employee. I stood there in the middle of my own living room, holding the tray of appetizers I had spent hours preparing, in my own house, the house where they lived, thanks to my generosity. Nobody said anything. Nobody defended me. The silence was so thick, I could feel it crushing my chest. I lowered the tray carefully, took my 2 grandchildren by the hand, and walked toward the back room. Every step burned inside me. 70 years of dignity reduced to nothing with a single sentence. The next morning, while Richard was drinking coffee in my kitchen, the doorbell rang. A messenger handed him a sealed envelope. I watched him open the document with that arrogant tranquility he had inherited from his father. I watched his face change color when he read the words. "The property owner requests an urgent meeting to discuss the terms of occupancy." His eyes shot up to me. I was standing by the window, sipping my tea, calm. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe again. But let me tell you how we got here, because this story didn't start that morning. It started 3 days earlier, when I decided to organize a birthday party for my grandson, Liam. 3 days, preparing every detail. The chocolate cake with raspberry filling, his favorite. The gold and white balloons covering the whole living room. The gifts piled up by the main table. More than $1,200 in toys I had pointed out to him in the catalog. All paid for by me. All in my house. My house. Do you understand? The house I bought with the money from my husband's life insurance. The house I opened to my son Richard when he lost his job 2 years ago. "Just for a few months, Mom," he had told me, "until we get back on our feet." 2 years later, they were still here. Victoria was decorating the walls with new paintings. Richard had turned my late husband's study into his personal office. My spaces became smaller and smaller. My bedroom, the small backyard garden, the kitchen in the mornings, before they woke up. But I stayed silent. Because they were my family. Because the grandkids filled me with joy. Because a mother always finds excuses to endure the unbearable. The afternoon of the party, Victoria arrived late. She walked in wearing that emerald green dress that probably cost more than she earns in a month. Of course, because the one financing her whims is me, even if she prefers to forget it. Her hair was fresh from the salon, her nails flawless, her makeup perfect, all while I had spent the morning cleaning every corner of the house. She entered laughing, kissing cheeks, greeting the guests as if she were the owner of the place. My son followed 2 steps behind her, smiling with that empty expression that had settled on his face since he married her. The guests began to fill the living room. Cousins, uncles, neighbors, family, friends. Everyone knew the truth. Everyone knew this was my house, that I had opened the doors for Richard and Victoria to live here, that I paid for the electricity, the water, the gas, the food, but no one mentioned it. It was the uncomfortable secret that floated in the air every time we got together. I was in the kitchen, finishing organizing the food trays, when I heard Victoria's voice rising above the others. She was talking to a young couple I didn't recognize, probably friends from her gym, from those yoga classes she attends with the membership I pay for. I picked up the tray of appetizers and went out into the living room. I smiled. I was ready to be the gracious hostess I have always been. And then, her eyes landed on me. There was no affection in that look. There was no respect. She looked at me the way one looks at something blocking the path. And in front of everyone, with that icy smile she had perfected, she said those words that would change everything. "Oh, are you the nanny? Please, take the kids to the guest room in the back." Time stopped. I saw the guests' faces freeze in uncomfortable expressions. I saw my cousin Margaret open her mouth to say something and then close it. I saw Uncle Charles look down at the floor. I saw Richard, my own son, the boy I carried in my arms, whom I raised alone after his father's death, laughing at me. The young couple next to Victoria laughed too. Nervous at first, but when they saw that no one defended me, their laughter became more confident. Victoria winked at them, as if sharing a private joke at my expense. My hands shook holding that tray. I felt the heat rising up my neck, my cheeks burning with humiliation. 70 years. 70 years of living with dignity, of working hard, of sacrificing for my family. And now, I was invisible. Worse than invisible. I was the help. I could have confronted her right there. I could have screamed that this was my house. That everything she touched, everything she used, everything she showed off, was paid for by me. But I didn't. Because there is something about deep pain that paralyzes you, that makes you small, that steals your voice. I set the tray on the table carefully. I searched for my grandchildren with my eyes. Liam was by the window, playing with his cousin. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, hugging her new doll. I called them with a gentle gesture. They came running, innocent, oblivious to the poison that had just been spilled over their grandmother. I took their little hands, so small, so warm, and I walked toward the back room, that room that used to be my sewing space, which Victoria had turned into a storage room for things she never used. Behind me, the party continued as if nothing had happened. The laughter resumed. The music started playing again. No one came to look for me. No one asked if I was okay. I was erased from my own celebration, in my own house, by the woman living under my roof, thanks to my charity. I closed the door to the back room carefully. My grandchildren looked at me with those big, curious eyes, not understanding why Grandma had left the party. Liam asked me if we could go back to eat cake. Chloe wanted to open more presents. I smiled at her. I always smiled at her, because they weren't to blame for having parents who had forgotten the meaning of gratitude. In a moment, my loves, first we're going to play here for a while, okay? I sat on the floor with them. My knees protested. 70 years don't forgive. But I needed to be there, on the floor, at their level, because if I remained standing, I felt I was going to collapse. Liam took out his new toy cars. Chloe started combing her doll's hair, and I, there in the middle, felt something inside me break into pieces so small I could never put them back together. I could hear the party on the other side of the door. The laughter, the music, the sound of glasses clinking in toasts. My party, the party I had organized, the party I had paid for, and I was locked in a dark room, hiding as if I were a shame. The lump in my throat tightened more and more. I took a deep breath. Once, twice, I wasn't going to cry. Not in front of the kids. They didn't deserve to carry the weight of my pain. An hour passed, maybe more. No one came to look for us. No one knocked on the door to ask if we were okay. It was as if we had ceased to exist the moment we crossed that threshold. Finally, I heard the guests beginning to say goodbye. Voices in the hallway. Thanks for coming. It was a beautiful party. The kids had so much fun. Victoria's voice, sweet and charming, bidding farewell to each person like the perfect hostess. The hostess of my house. When the last guest left, when silence finally fell over the house, I opened the door to the room. The children had fallen asleep on the floor, hugging their toys. I carried them one by one to their beds, Liam first, then Chloe. I kissed them on the forehead. They were the only pure thing left in all of this. I walked down the stairs slowly. The living room was a disaster. Dirty plates everywhere. Half-full glasses. Napkins on the floor. The balloons were starting to deflate, hanging sadly from the walls. No one had cleaned anything. Of course not. That's what I was for, right? The nanny, the maid, the invisible woman who picked up after everyone had their fun. Richard was on the sofa, checking his phone. Victoria was counting the money they had received as a gift for Liam. They didn't even look up when I walked in. I stood there, looking at them, waiting for an apology, an explanation, something. Anything that indicated they realized what they had done. Nothing. Richard yawned. Party was good, right? The kids had fun. Victoria nodded, without stopping counting the bills. Yeah, although I would have preferred to have it in the garden. But well, with this house being so small, you can't ask for much. Small house. My 4-bedroom house, 2 full baths, front and back garden. The house I had bought with the sweat of years of work alongside my late husband. Small, something in my chest hardened, as if a muscle that had been tense for years finally turned to stone. I'm going to sleep, I said. My voice sounded strange, flat, empty. Richard didn't even answer. Victoria mumbled something about cleaning tomorrow. I went up to my room, the only room that was still completely mine. I locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands, wrinkled hands, hands that had worked a lifetime, hands that had raised a son, hands that had built a home, hands that were now trembling with contained rage. I didn't cry. Crying is for when you still have hope that something will change. I had passed that stage. I sat there for hours, in the dark, feeling something ancient and dormant inside me beginning to wake up. It wasn't pain. I knew pain well already. This was different. This was clarity, cold, precise, unbreakable. I thought about my husband, about how we had bought this house 35 years ago, about the nights we spent painting the walls, planting trees in the garden, imagining the future. He had died 10 years ago, but his presence still lived in every corner of this house, and I had allowed strangers to invade it, because Victoria was a stranger. She always had been. I remembered the day Richard introduced her to me. She's different, Mom. She's special. What he didn't tell me is that she was calculating, that she had seen in my son a man without a backbone, easy to manipulate, that she had seen in me a lonely old woman, easy to exploit, and I had let it happen because I loved my son, because I loved my grandchildren, because mothers do stupid things in the name of love. But that night, sitting on my bed, in my room, in my house, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to wait for them to realize their mistake. I was going to act. At 6 a.m, when the sun was barely starting to filter through the curtains, I grabbed my phone. I looked for a number I hadn't dialed in months. Arthur, my attorney, the same man who had handled my husband's life insurance papers, the same one who had put this house in my name, solely in my name, when Richard was still a teenager. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. Arthur, it's Eleanor. I need you to prepare some documents. It's urgent. My voice didn't shake. For the first time in 2 years, my voice sounded firm, strong, mine. I heard the silence on the other end of the line. Then, his professional voice. Tell me what you need. A formal notice. For my son and his wife, regarding the terms of occupancy on my property. Another silence. Longer this time. Are you sure, Eleanor? I have never been more sure of anything in my life. All right. I'll have it ready for tomorrow. I hung up. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The weight on my chest had disappeared. For the first time in years, I felt light. I went down to the kitchen. I made my coffee. I sat by the window, looking at the garden I loved so much, and I waited. Richard came down at 9 a.m, dragging his feet, with that hangover face he got every time he drank too much wine at parties. He saw me sitting at the kitchen table, drinking my coffee, and barely greeted me with a grunt. He opened the refrigerator, looking for the eggs I always prepared for him. He waited. I kept drinking my coffee, looking out the window. You're not making breakfast? He asked, with that tone of annoyed surprise. Not today, I replied without looking at him. There's cereal in the pantry. I heard him snort, close the refrigerator harder than necessary. But he didn't say anything else. He took a box of cereal and served himself like a spoiled child who just discovered Mom isn't going to pamper him. Victoria came down half an hour later, perfectly groomed as always, in her brand-name activewear that I had given her for her last birthday. She looked at me with that superficial smile she used when she needed something. Eleanor, could you watch the kids this afternoon? I have an appointment at the spa with the girls. Eleanor. She didn't even call me Mom. She never had. I can't, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I have an appointment. Her eyebrows arched. An appointment? You. As if it were inconceivable that a 70-year-old woman had a life of her own. Yes, me. Victoria exchanged a look with Richard. That look I had seen 1,000 times. That look that said, "Your mother is being difficult again." Well, Victoria said with a tense voice, you'll have to cancel it. I already paid for the spa appointment and... I am not canceling anything, I interrupted her, setting my mug on the table with a sharp thud. Call a babysitter? I'm sure you can afford one, right? Especially with all the money you save, living here for free. The silence that followed was brutal. Richard stopped chewing his cereal. Victoria froze, her mouth slightly open. "Excuse me?" Victoria said, her voice going up an octave. "You heard me perfectly." Richard stood up. "Mom, what is wrong with you? Why are you being like this?" "Like what, Richard? Like a person who deserves respect in her own home?" "Oh my God." Victoria let out a dry laugh. "Are you still resentful about yesterday?" "It was a joke, Eleanor. An innocent joke." "A joke," I repeated, savoring the words. "Calling me the nanny in front of 30 people, in my own house, at the party I organized and paid for. It was a joke." "You're exaggerating," Richard intervened, using that condescending tone he lately used for everything I said. Always so dramatic, dramatic. The same word his father used when I complained about something, the same word I had swallowed for 40 years of marriage. But my husband had at least respected me. At least he had worked. At least he had been a man. "I think," I said slowly, "that you two have forgotten something very important." "And what is that?" asked Victoria, crossing her arms. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. The three of us stood motionless. I knew exactly who it was. I had been waiting for him all morning. "I'll get it," I said, getting up from the table. I walked to the door. A young messenger greeted me with a professional smile. "Mr. Richard Davis." "One moment," I told him. I turned toward the kitchen. "Richard, it's for you." I watched him approach, confused. The messenger handed him a sealed manila envelope and a tablet to sign. Richard scribbled his signature, took the envelope, and closed the door. "What is this?" he murmured, tearing the paper. I sat back down in my chair. I took my coffee, which was already cold, but I didn't care. This was worth it. I watched his eyes move from left to right as he read. I watched the color leave his face. I watched his hands start to shake, holding the document. "What does it say?" asked Victoria, stepping closer. Richard didn't answer. He kept reading, once, twice, as if the words were going to change if he read them enough times. Victoria snatched the paper from his hands. Her eyes widened as she read. Her mouth opened. Then it closed. Then it opened again. This has to be a mistake," Victoria stammered. "It is not a mistake," I said calmly. Richard looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. "Mom, what is this?" "It is a formal notice," I explained calmly, "from the property owner, me, requesting an urgent meeting with the tenants. You two, to discuss the terms of your occupancy on my property." "Your property." Victoria let out a hysterical laugh. "This house belongs to the family. It belongs to Richard as much as to you." "No," I said, and the word came out cold as ice. "This house is in my name. Only in my name. It always has been. You can check it in the public records, if you want. But," Richard looked like a lost child. "Mom, I thought that. When you died. When I died," I repeated. "How convenient that you are already planning my funeral." "Son, but I have news for you. I am still very much alive, and very tired of being treated like the maid in my own house." "Nobody treats you like a maid," Richard protested. "No," with coming lies. I stood up, looking him straight in the eye. "Yesterday, your wife called me the nanny. You laughed. I was sent to the guest room at my own party. And this morning, your wife assumed I was going to cancel my plans to watch her kids while she goes to the spa. A spa that I will probably pay for too, because I pay for everything in this house. That's not." Richard tried to speak, but couldn't find the words. "It's not that. Is it not true? Tell me, how much rent do you pay? How much do you contribute for utilities? For food? For maintenance?" Silence. "Exactly. Nothing. You pay nothing. You live here for free. You eat here for free. You clothe yourselves, have fun, exist here for free. While I, at 70 years old, remain the only one keeping this roof over your heads. Mom, Richard is looking for a job. You know that. It has been 2 years, Richard. 2 years of excuses. 2 years of promises. And instead of improving, every day you treat me worse. As if I owed you something. As if this were your house and I were the guest." Victoria dropped the document on the table. "You can't kick us out. We are your family." "Family is respected," I said. "Family is cared for. Family does not humiliate their elders in front of strangers." "It was a joke," Victoria insisted. but her voice had lost all its previous confidence. No, it was an insult. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Richard slumped into a chair. He looked genuinely lost. What do you want us to do? I want you to read that document. I want you to understand that this house is mine. I want you to come to the meeting with the attorney on Friday at 10 in the morning. And I want you, for the first time in 2 years, to treat me with the dignity I deserve. And if we don't go to that meeting? Asked Victoria, trying to regain some control. I looked directly at her, without blinking, without smiling. Then on Friday at 10 to 1, I will begin the legal eviction process. The words fell like stones in still water. Richard covered his face with his hands. Victoria looked at me with pure hate. But I didn't care anymore if they hated me. I cared that they respected me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I said, taking my purse from the table. I have that appointment I mentioned. I walked toward the door, feeling taller than I had in years. I left the house without looking back. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear. It was pure adrenaline, something I hadn't felt in decades. I got into my car, that silver sedan I had bought with my own money 5 years ago, and drove aimlessly for half an hour. I needed to process what I had just done. I needed to make sure I wasn't going to back down. I ended up at the coffee shop where I used to meet with Susan, my lifelong friend. The only person who had the courage to tell me the truth during these 2 years, the only one who hadn't pretended everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I called her from the parking lot. She answered on the second ring. Susan, are you free? I need to talk to you. I heard the background noise of her house. Give me 20 minutes. I'll meet you at our usual spot. I entered the shop and ordered a latte. I sat by the window, watching people pass by. Young mothers with strollers, elderly people walking slowly, couples holding hands. The world kept turning while mine had just flipped completely. Susan arrived with her usual energy, 72 years old, and she still walked like she was 50. She sat across from me, studied my face, and smiled. You did it. It wasn't a question. How do you know? Because you have that look of a woman who just got her life back. I told her everything. The party, the humiliation, the early morning decision, the notice. Richard and Victoria's faces that morning. I didn't omit any detail. Susan listened in silence, nodding occasionally, squeezing my hand when my voice cracked, remembering the most painful parts. When I finished, she sighed deeply. It was about time, Eleanor. It was about time. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? I asked, needing to hear it from someone else. The right thing. Susan leaned forward. Eleanor, you've been walked all over in your own house for 2 years. You've paid for everything. You've endured everything. You've sacrificed your comfort, your space, your peace of mind. And for what? So your daughter-in-law can call you the nanny in front of the whole family? But they are my family. The family that respects you deserves your loyalty. The family that humiliates you deserves your distance. Susan drank her coffee. Richard is your son, yes, but he stopped behaving like one a long time ago. And that woman? That woman never saw you as family. She saw you as a wallet with legs. Her words were harsh, but true. So true they hurt. And if I regret it, then you back down. But something tells me you won't. Because what I saw in your eyes when you arrived isn't doubt. It's determination. Welcome back, Eleanor. Haven't seen you in a while. We stayed at the coffee shop for 2 hours. We talked about everything and nothing. About her grandkids, her trips, her plans. She reminded me that life didn't end at 70, that there was still time to live, to enjoy, to be myself without apologizing for existing. When I returned home at noon, the atmosphere had changed completely. Richard and Victoria were in the living room, talking in low voices. When they saw me enter, they shut up immediately, like trapped children, planning something. I went up to my room without saying a word. I needed to keep my distance, maintain firmness. I couldn't let myself soften by sad faces or manipulative words. That night, at dinner time, no one came down. It was the first time in 2 years I didn't prepare food for everyone. I made myself a light soup, sat alone in the kitchen, and ate in peace. The silence was uncomfortable, but also liberating. At 8 at night, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Richard appeared in the kitchen. He wore that expression of a repentant puppy he used since he was a boy when he had done something wrong. "Mom, we need to talk. We will talk on Friday." With the attorney present, "No, we need to talk now. This is madness. You can't kick us out like this." The kids will be fine," I interrupted him. "Kids adapt. You are the one who needs to learn to be a father and provider instead of living like an eternal teenager in his mother's house. That is unfair. Unfair." I set my spoon on the table. "Do you know what is unfair, Richard? That you are 42 years old and still expecting your 70-year-old mother to solve your life? That your wife treats me like trash and you say nothing? That I pay for everything in this house and you act as if you were doing me a favor by living here? I didn't know you felt that way. Because you never asked. Because you never cared. You just assumed I would always be here, enduring everything. Because that is what mothers do, right? Sacrifice themselves until they disappear." Richard sat across from me. For the first time I saw something resembling understanding in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I don't want easy apologies, Richard. I want real changes. And if you can't give them to me here, then you need to find your own place. We don't have money to move. You know that. Then get a job. Any job. Stop waiting for the perfect position that is never going to come and accept that you have to start from the bottom sometimes. There are men your age working in supermarkets, at gas stations, in whatever it takes to support their families. Why can't you?" The silence that followed was crushing. Richard looked at the table as if the answers were written there. "Victoria wouldn't want me to." "Victoria." I laughed humorlessly. "Victoria, who doesn't work. Victoria, who goes to the spa and the gym with my money. Victoria, who called me the nanny in my own house. That Victoria decides what kind of job is worthy of you. It's more complicated than that." "No, Richard. It is very simple. You are a grown man living off his mother because you are afraid to disappoint a woman who doesn't even respect you." The words came out harsher than I intended, but they needed to come out. They needed to be said. Richard remained silent for long minutes. Then he stood up. "I'll talk to Victoria," he said finally. "No. Talk to yourself first. Decide what kind of man you want to be. Decide if you want to keep being your wife's puppet or if you want to be the father your children need." I watched him go up the stairs slowly, with his shoulders slumped. A part of me wanted to run after him, hug him, tell him everything would be okay. But that part of me, the overprotective mother who had ruined him with her blind love, needed to die. That night, lying in my bed, I heard raised voices in Richard and Victoria's room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. She was furious. He was trying to calm her down. It was the same dynamic as always. I grabbed my phone and sent a text to Arthur, my lawyer. All set for Friday. His reply came 2 minutes later. "Everything prepared. I have the property deeds, the utility bills in your name, and the legal options we discussed. Stay sure." My fingers moved over the keyboard without hesitation. Completely sure. "Good. See you Friday at 10. And, Eleanor, you are doing the right thing." I put the phone away and closed my eyes. For the first time in 2 years, I slept through the night without waking up, without nightmares, without that constant weight on my chest that accompanied me every morning. Something had changed. I had changed, and there was no turning back. The following days passed in a strange stillness. Richard and Victoria avoided me. I went about my normal life. I cooked only for myself. I cleaned only my space. I behaved exactly like what I was. The owner of the house, not the maid. On Thursday night, a day before the meeting with the attorney, Victoria finally sought me out. I found her in the kitchen, waiting for me. She was wearing a simple cream-colored dress, without excessive makeup, a more human version of herself. "Eleanor, can we talk?" I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "Talk. I know I have been. Difficult. I know I haven't been the best daughter-in-law." She paused, as if waiting for me to interrupt her with comforting words. I said nothing. "But you can't kick us out. The kids need you. Richard needs you. Her voice cracked slightly. "I need you too." Need. That word. "You need me?" I asked softly. "Or do you need my house? My money? My free labor as a nanny?" "It's not like that." "No? Then tell me, Victoria, when was the last time you asked me how I was? When was the last time you thanked me for something? When was the last time you treated me like something more than a useful piece of furniture? Victoria opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Her eyes filled with tears, tears that could have been real or could have been calculated. At that point, I didn't care to distinguish. I didn't know you felt that way, she said finally, with a trembling voice. Everyone says the same thing. Richard said exactly the same thing last night. Do you know why you didn't know? Because you never asked. Because you never cared enough to ask. Eleanor, please. She stepped closer. I know I made a mistake the day of the party. It was cruel. It was stupid. But I was stressed. I had drunk a little wine. And you showed who you really are when you let your guard down? I interrupted her. People don't become cruel by accident. Victoria, you don't humiliate someone in front of 30 people by mistake. You do it because deep down, that is what you really think. That I am less than you. That I am the help. That I am expendable. That's not true. Then tell me, why do you never call me Mom? In 5 years of marriage to my son, not once have you used that word with me. Always Eleanor, as if I were your landlady, your employee, anything but family. Victoria remained silent, because she knew I was right, and there was no way to deny it without blatantly lying. I can change, she said after a long moment. I can be better. We can be better. Give me a chance to prove it to you. You had 2 years of chances. 2 years in which you chose to treat me a little worse every day. 2 years in which you assumed I was always going to be there, enduring. Because grandmothers don't have options, right? They just have to accept what they're given. Please. Her voice broke completely. Don't kick us out. Where are we going to go? We have nothing. And there it was, the naked truth. They had nothing, because they had lived these 2 years like parasites, consuming everything I provided without saving a single cent, without making a single sacrifice, without planning a single day of the future. That, I said quietly, is not my problem. Victoria looked at me as if I had slapped her, as if she couldn't believe those words had come out of my mouth. How can you be so cold, so cruel, cruel? The word made me laugh without humor. Victoria, I have been anything but cruel. I have been generous to the point of stupidity. I have been patient to the point of humiliation. I have been kind until I became invisible. But no more. The cruelty was yours. I am just reclaiming what was always mine. My dignity. The kids are going to hate you, she said. And there was a threat in her voice. I walked closer to her. I looked her directly in the eyes, and I spoke with an icy calm I didn't know I possessed. The kids are going to understand one day that their grandmother respected herself, and if you are vindictive enough to turn them against me, then you will only confirm that I made the right decision. Victoria stepped back, surprised by the tone. Then her expression changed. The fake face of vulnerability vanished, and what remained was pure rage. Fine, she spat the word. If that's how you want it, that's how it will be. But don't think you're going to be able to see your grandkids after this. I'm going to keep them away from you as much as I can. They are going to grow up without knowing who you are. Then, I said softly, you are going to confirm before a judge that you are capable of using your children as weapons. Very useful information for my attorney. Her eyes widened. She hadn't thought of that. You wouldn't dare. Victoria, I just started an eviction process against my own son. Do you really think I wouldn't dare fight for my rights as a grandmother if you try to keep me away from those children? I saw her swallow hard. I saw her realize she had completely underestimated who she was dealing with. I wasn't the compliant old woman she could manipulate anymore. I was someone different, someone stronger. Victoria left the kitchen without saying another word. I heard her footsteps going up the stairs quickly. I heard when her bedroom door slammed shut, and then the sound of raised voices began again. I stayed alone in the kitchen, standing by the counter, holding my glass of water with steady hands. No shaking, no tears, no regret. That night I barely slept, not out of fear or doubt, but out of anticipation. Tomorrow was the day. Tomorrow everything would become official. Tomorrow they were going to understand, in front of a lawyer, with legal documents on the table, that their time of living for free was over. At 6 in the morning I was already awake. I took a long bath. I put on my best gray pantsuit, the one I used for important occasions. I applied my makeup with care. I combed my hair back into an elegant bun. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman I had been before life, and marriage softened me too much. I saw strength. I saw determination. I went down to eat breakfast. Richard was already in the kitchen, drinking coffee. He looked terrible. Puffy eyes, unshaven beard, wrinkled clothes. Probably hadn't slept at all. "Good morning," I said with neutrality. "Good morning," he replied without looking at me. I prepared my breakfast in silence. Toast with jam, orange juice, another coffee. I sat in my usual spot by the window. "Are you really going to do this?" asked Richard after several minutes of tense silence. "Yes," end quote. "And if I promise you things are going to change?" "You already promised that 2 years ago, when I opened the doors of this house to you. You said it would be temporary. You said you would look for work. You said you would save for your own house. Which of those promises did you keep?" Richard didn't answer, because we both knew the answer. "Mom, he started, but his voice cracked. For a moment, just a moment, I felt my resolve waver. He was my son, my only son. The baby I had held, the boy I had raised alone after being widowed, the young man I had sent to college with so much sacrifice. But then I remembered the laughter, his laughter when Victoria called me the nanny, his laughter joining hers while I was humiliated, and the moment of weakness passed. "Richard, you chose your wife. You chose to play her game. You chose to laugh when she insulted me. Every decision has consequences, and these are the consequences of your choices. She is my wife. I had to support her." "No," I interrupted him firmly. "You had to defend me. You had to set boundaries. You had to be a man, not a spectator to my humiliation." He dropped his head into his hands. I saw his shoulders shake slightly. He was crying. Part of me wanted to console him, but it wasn't my job to fix what he had broken anymore. At 9 in the morning, I stood up. I grabbed my purse, verified that I had all the documents Arthur had asked for. "The meeting is at 10, I said. "At the law office on Main Street, number 245, Suite 312. Don't be late." "And if we don't go?" asked Richard, looking up. "Then the legal process continues without your presence, and it will be much more complicated for you." I left the house without looking back. The sky was clear, one of those perfect autumn days where the air is crisp and the sun warms just enough. I felt light, as if I had taken off a very heavy coat I had been carrying for years. I arrived at the law office 15 minutes early. Arthur was already there, waiting for me in the lobby. He was 68 years old, completely white hair, and that calm presence only decades of experience give. "Eleanor," he greeted me with a smile. "You look radiant." "I feel radiant," I admitted. "Nervous but radiant. It's normal. What you are doing requires a lot of courage." We went up to the 3rd floor. His office was exactly as I remembered it. Law books on the walls, an antique dark wood desk, comfortable chairs for clients. Everything smelled of old paper and fresh coffee. "Do you think they'll come?" I asked him as we sat down. "They will come," he said with certainty, "because they know if they don't, things are going to get much worse for them." Arthur spread several documents on the desk. Deeds to the house, utility statements, everything in my name, everything paid by me for the last 2 years. "Here is everything," he explained. "The property is completely yours. There is no legal right of theirs over the property. Technically, they have been living as guests at your discretion. Now, if you want to formalize their exit, we have 3 options." Arthur began to explain the options to me with that professional and calm voice that made me feel everything was under control. "Option 1. Give them 30 days to find another place and leave voluntarily. Option 2. Establish a formal lease agreement with rent and clear rules. Option 3. Immediate eviction process if they refused to cooperate." "My recommendation," said Arthur, "is to start with option 1. You give them 30 days. It's enough time for them to look for something, but not so much that they get comfortable again and think you gave in. And if they refuse, then we move to option 3. But in my experience, when people see legal documents, when they understand the situation is serious, They usually cooperate. I looked at the papers in front of me. Documents certifying that this house was mine, only mine, that I had every legal right to decide who lived in it and who didn't. 30 days, I repeated. It's sufficient. It's what the law considers reasonable. And Eleanor, remember, you gave them 2 years. 2 years of free roof, food, and utilities. You were already more than generous. He was right. I knew it, but the lump in my throat was still there. At 10 o'clock sharp, the office door opened. Richard entered first, in a dark suit and tie, trying to look professional, but his red eyes gave him away. Victoria entered behind him, dressed in black, as if going to a funeral. How appropriate. Arthur stood up. Good morning. I am the attorney Arthur Moore. Please, take a seat. Richard and Victoria sat across from the desk. I was to the side, observing them. Richard didn't look at me. Victoria did, with that expression of barely contained hate. Arthur began with formality. This meeting has been requested by Mrs. Eleanor Vance, legal owner of the property located at 153 Rosewood Street. The purpose is to establish the terms of occupancy, or failing that, the terms of departure for the current occupants. Occupants, murmured Victoria, as if we were strangers. According to the law, continued Arthur unmoved, anyone residing in a property without a formal lease agreement is considered an occupant by invitation of the owner, which is exactly your situation. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. This is ridiculous. She's my mother. It's our family. And precisely because we are family, I said, speaking for the first time since they entered, I expected a minimum of respect. But apparently, blood does not guarantee decency. Mom, please. Mr. Vance, Arthur interrupted him. I suggest you listen before speaking. I have documentation here you need to review. He slid a folder toward them. Richard opened it with trembling hands. Inside were copies of the deeds, receipts for all utilities paid over 24 months, a complete breakdown of expenses. I watched Richard turn the pages, how his eyes widened with every figure. $22,000 in basic utilities, $38,000 in food and household items, $12,000 in medical expenses for the children, $8,000 in clothes and entertainment, numbers that added up to an obscene amount. $80,000, said Arthur. That is what Mrs. Eleanor has invested in supporting you for 2 years, without counting the rental value of the property, which in this area would be around $1,800 a month. If we add that, we are talking about another $43,000. In total, $123,000 in 2 years. The silence that followed was so heavy I could feel it pressing against my chest. Victoria was the first to speak. You can't charge us that. You never said you were keeping track of expenses. We never talked about money. I am not charging anything, I clarified. I just want you to see, with real numbers, what I have given you. I want you to understand that my generosity had a real cost, a cost that you ignored completely. Richard dropped the papers on the desk. We don't have that amount of money. We have nothing. I know, I said softly. And precisely because of that we reached this point. Arthur took another document. Mrs. Eleanor is willing to give you 30 days to find another place of residence. During that time, you can continue in the property at no cost. After those 30 days, you must vacate the property completely. 30 days. Victoria laughed with disbelief. How are we supposed to find a place in 30 days? With what money? Richard doesn't have a job. Then maybe, I said calmly, it is time for Richard to accept any available job, and maybe it is time for you to look for employment too. Victoria, because living off your mother-in-law is no longer an option. You are careful with what you are going to say. Arthur interrupted her with a firm voice. We are in a legal process. Any insult or threat will be recorded and can be used against you. Victoria closed her mouth, but her eyes threw daggers. Richard covered his face with his hands. I can't believe you are doing this, Mom, after everything we have been through together, after everything I have done for you. I corrected him. Because let's be honest. Richard, what have you done for me lately, besides allowing your wife to humiliate me? It was a mistake. It was a decision. And decisions have consequences. Arthur placed a final document on the desk. This is the voluntary vacation agreement. If you sign it today, you commit to vacating the property in 30 days. If you don't sign it, we will proceed with the legal eviction, which will take more time but will be much more complicated and costly for you. You could even have trouble renting in the future with an eviction on your record. Richard looked at the document, then he looked at me. You are really going to force us to do this? You forced me to do this, I replied. The day you allowed your wife to treat me like trash. The day you forgot that everything you have is thanks to me. Redated. The day you decided to be a husband before a son, but in the most cowardly way possible. And the kids? Asked Victoria. Have you thought about them? About how this is going to affect them? The kids are going to learn a valuable lesson, I said. They are going to learn that actions have consequences. They are going to learn that you cannot bite the hand that feeds you, and they are going to learn that their grandmother respects herself, which is more important than any material comfort. I will never forgive you for this, said Victoria coldly. I don't need your forgiveness. I needed my dignity back, and now I have it. Arthur pushed the document toward Richard. You have two options. You sign this now and keep some control over the situation. Or you don't sign and we let the law run its course. What do you decide? Richard took the pen with shaking hands. He held it over the paper for long seconds. I watched him debate internally. I saw the exact moment he gave up. I'll sign. Victoria looked at him with disbelief. Are you seriously going to sign that? We have no choice, said Richard with a dead voice. There is always a choice. We can fight this. We can. We can't do anything, Richard interrupted her. It's her house. It always was. And she has every legal right to kick us out. Victoria glared at me. But she took the pen. And she signed. With so much force, she almost tore through the paper. Arthur collected the document. Good. You have until January 8th to vacate the property completely. That includes all your personal belongings. Mrs. Eleanor will perform a final inspection that day. If there are damages to the property, corresponding legal measures will be taken. Richard stood up. He looked 10 years older than when he had entered. That's it. That's it, confirmed Arthur. Richard headed for the door. Victoria followed him, but before leaving, she turned to me. I hope it's worth it, she said. I hope your pride keeps you warm at night when you are alone in that big, empty house. My peace of mind is worth more than any toxic company. I replied without flinching. The door closed behind them. The silence that remained was different. It wasn't the uncomfortable silence from before. It was a clean, liberating silence. Are you okay? Asked Arthur. I stared at the closed door. I thought about Richard, about the grandkids I might not see for a while, about the family holidays that would now be awkward, about everything that had just changed forever. Yes, I said finally. I'm okay. For the first time in a long time, I am okay. I left the law office with a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't exactly happiness. It wasn't sadness either. It was something in between. A mix of relief, emotional exhaustion, and a strange peace I hadn't felt in years. Arthur walked me to the parking lot. Before saying goodbye, he put his hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, Eleanor. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but in time, you will see it clearly. Thank you, Arthur, for everything. That's what I'm here for. And remember, if you need anything during these 30 days, if there is any problem, call me immediately, no matter the time. I drove home taking the long route. I wasn't in a hurry to arrive. I knew what awaited me, the tension, the resentment, the looks loaded with hate, but I also knew it was temporary. Just 30 more days. 30 days and I would regain my space completely. When I arrived, Richard's car was in the driveway. I sighed deeply before entering. The house was silent, a heavy, deliberate silence. I went up to my room and closed the door. I needed to process everything that had happened. I sat on my bed and looked around. This room had always been my sanctuary. The ivory walls I had painted myself, the white linen curtains I had chosen with care, the photograph of my husband on the nightstand. This was my space, and soon, the whole house would be my space again. The phone rang. It was Susan. How did it go? I told her everything, every detail of the meeting. Richard and Victoria's faces, the documents, the final signature. Susan listened in silence until I finished. "I'm proud of you," she said with a warm voice. "I know it wasn't easy. It wasn't. And it's probably not going to get easier in the next 30 days. Do you want to come stay with me? I have plenty of room. You can escape the tension." I considered it for a moment. It would be easier, more comfortable, but it would also be giving up. It would be letting them kick me out of my own house. No, I need to stay. It's my house. I'm not going to be the one who leaves. That's my Eleanor. But promise me you'll call if things get difficult. I promise. After hanging up, I went down to make myself something to eat. The kitchen was empty, but I could feel their presence elsewhere in the house. Richard was probably in his makeshift office. Victoria, who knows where. The kids must be at school. I prepared a simple salad. I sat to eat alone at the kitchen table. The silence was louder than any scream. It was the silence of bridges burning, of relationships breaking, of inevitable endings. That afternoon, when the kids came home from school, they ran to me as always. Liam hugged my legs. Chloe showed me a drawing she had made in class. "Look, Grandma, it's our house." I looked at the drawing. A house with a red roof and big windows, flowers in the garden, and 5 stick figures. Mom, Dad, the 2 kids, and me. A happy family drawn with colored crayons. I felt something tighten in my throat. "It is beautiful, my love. Can I put it on the refrigerator?" Of course. Victoria appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Kids, go to your room. You have homework." "But, Grandma." Now, her voice was sharp. The kids looked at me confused, but obeyed. When their footsteps faded upstairs, Victoria crossed her arms. "I don't want you to tell them anything about the move. Not yet." I wasn't going to tell them anything. That is their parents' responsibility. Good, because if you upset them, if you turn them against us— Victoria, I interrupted her wearily. "I am not like you. I am not going to use the kids as weapons. You two will decide how and when to tell them. I will respect that decision." She studied me with distrust, as if she couldn't believe someone wasn't as manipulative as her. "Whatever. Just stay away from them for the next few weeks. They live in my house. It is difficult to stay away." "Not for much longer," she said with venom in her voice, and left the kitchen. The following days were exactly what I expected. Ice, silence, doors closing when I entered a room, conversations stopping abruptly when I appeared. Richard didn't speak to me. Victoria only spoke to me when absolutely necessary, and always with that tone of barely contained hostility. But I kept my routine. I got up early, ate breakfast alone, read, watched my shows, talked on the phone with Susan and other friends. I lived my life without apologizing for it. A week after the meeting with the attorney, I received a call from my cousin Margaret, the one who had been at the party, the one who had witnessed my humiliation. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you." "Tell me." "It's about Richard. He called me yesterday. He is trying to convince the family to intervene. He says you have become irrational, that you are throwing your grandchildren onto the street." I closed my eyes. Of course, Richard was playing the victim card. "And what do you think, Margaret?" There was a pause. "I was there. Eleanor, I saw what Victoria did to you. I saw how Richard laughed. We all saw it. And we all stayed silent. And that shames me. But now Richard is saying it was just a joke, that you are exaggerating, and the family believes him. Some do. The ones who weren't at the party. The ones who only hear his version. And what do they expect me to do? Continue allowing them to treat me like this in my own house? No, I don't expect that. That's why I'm calling you, to warn you that you are going to get calls. Pressure. They are going to try to make you feel guilty. They are going to say you are destroying the family. They already destroyed it when they allowed me to be humiliated without saying anything. I know, and you are right. I just wanted you to be prepared. And she was right. The calls started that same afternoon. First it was my cousin Lydia. "Eleanor, you can't do this. They are your family. Richard made a mistake. But he doesn't deserve this." Then it was Uncle Charles. "You are being very harsh. Eleanor, the kids are going to suffer." And then, one after another, voices that hadn't defended me when I needed it. Now ask me to forgive, to forget, to be the adult in the situation. To each one I said the same thing. I am not destroying the family. I am reclaiming my dignity. If that makes you uncomfortable, that is your problem, not mine. Some understood. Most didn't. But I didn't care anymore. 10 days after the signing, something changed. I came home after grocery shopping and saw boxes in the living room. Richard and Victoria had started packing. It was real. They were really going to leave. I felt a pang in my chest. For a second, just a second, I wondered if I should stop them. If I should say, let's forget it all. Let's start over. But then I remembered. I remembered the laughter. I remembered the looks of contempt. I remembered every time I felt invisible in my own house, and the pang disappeared. That night, Richard knocked on my bedroom door. It was the first time he tried to talk to me since the meeting with the lawyer. Can I come in? Go ahead. He entered slowly, as if walking on a minefield. He sat on the chair by my bed. We found a place, he said in a low voice. It's small. A 2-bedroom apartment across town. The rent is $1,200 a month. I'm glad you found something. I got a job. That surprised me. I looked up. Doing what? Warehouse supervisor. It's not what you studied. It's not what I expected. But it pays $2,800 a month. With Victoria's job as a receptionist, which pays $1,900, we can cover the rent and the basics. Victoria got a job too. She had no choice. None of us did. We stayed silent for a moment. Do you know what the worst part of all this is? Asked Richard. It's not having to move. It's not having to work in a warehouse. It's realizing you were right. About everything. I became someone I don't recognize. Someone who allows his wife to humiliate his mother. Someone who lives off his mother at 42 without feeling shame. Richard. No, let me finish, please. He took a deep breath. I spent these last few days very angry with you, telling myself you were cruel, that you were unfair. But the truth is, you simply stopped allowing what we were doing wrong. And that terrified me. Because it meant we had to finally grow up, that we had to be responsible adults. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a glimmer of the son I had raised, of the man he could be if he allowed himself. It is never too late to change, I said softly. Will you be able to forgive me someday? I already forgave you, Richard. What I am not going to do is allow you to treat me like that again. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, nor does it mean going back to how things were. I understand. He stood up. The kids ask why we are moving. What did you tell them? That it is time we had our own house? That Grandma needs her space? And how did they take it? Liam is excited. He thinks it's an adventure. Chloe is sad. She says she doesn't want to leave Grandma. I felt my heart squeeze. You can visit me whenever you want. This will always be your grandma's house. I know. Thanks. Richard walked toward the door, but stopped before leaving. One more thing. I talked to Victoria about how she treated you, about the party. I told her that when we move, things are going to be different. That if she wants our marriage to work, she has to learn to respect my mother. And what did she say? She said she would try. I don't know if she means it, but at least she said it. After he left, I sat on my bed, processing the conversation. There was a small part of me that wanted to believe things could get better between us. But I also knew words are easy. Actions are what really count. The following days, the house was filled with activity. More boxes. More packing. Victoria had hired a moving company for the last day. I kept to my routine, watching from a distance as my house slowly emptied of their presence. One afternoon, while I was drinking tea in the living room, Chloe came down the stairs with her unicorn backpack. She sat next to me on the sofa, closer than usual. Grandma, you don't love us anymore. The question went through me like a dagger. My love, why do you ask that? Because Mommy says you are kicking us out of the house. I took a deep breath. I controlled the rage I felt toward Victoria for putting those words in the head of a 6-year-old girl. Chloe, look at me. I took her small hands between mine. I love you more than anything in the world. You and your brother. I am always going to love you. But sometimes, adults need to make changes. Your daddy and mommy need their own space. And Grandma needs hers too. But we aren't going to live with you anymore. You aren't going to live here, but you are going to visit me all the time, and I am going to visit you. Nothing changes between us. My sweetheart, Grandma is always going to be here for you. Promise. Promise. Chloe hugged me. I felt her tears wetting my blouse. I held her tight, wishing I could protect her from the pain we adults cause with our decisions, but also knowing this was a necessary lesson, that she would see how her grandmother respected herself, and someday, when she was big, she would understand. When Victoria came down and saw the scene, her expression hardened. "Chloe, stop bothering your grandmother. Come help me with your room." "She is not bothering me," I said firmly. Victoria ignored me. "Chloe." Now, the girl pulled away from me reluctantly. Before going up, she looked at me with those big, sad eyes. I winked at her. I tried to smile. She returned a small smile before disappearing up the stairs. 2 days before the move, the doorbell rang in the mid-afternoon. I opened the door and found 3 women I recognized from the PTA meetings at the kids' school. Friends of Victoria. "Mrs. Eleanor?" said the tallest one, a woman of about 35 with designer glasses. "Yes, we are friends of Victoria. We came to talk to you. Victoria is upstairs. We didn't come to see Victoria. We came to talk to you." I let them in. Curious. They sat in the living room, looking at the stacked boxes with uncomfortable expressions. "How can I help you?" The tall woman spoke again. "Look, we don't want to meddle where we aren't called, but Victoria is our friend, and she told us what is happening, that you are kicking her out of the house, her and the children." "I understand Victoria has given you her version of the facts," I said calmly, "but I assure you the story is more complex than that." "The children are going to suffer," said another of the women, a blonde with long red painted nails. "How can you do this to them? They are your grandchildren. My grandchildren are going to be perfectly fine. They are going to have a roof over their heads, food on the table, and parents who are finally taking responsibility for their lives." "But Victoria says you are a millionaire," intervened the third woman, "that you have this huge house just for you. Wouldn't it be easier to share?" I felt indignation rise up my throat. I am not a millionaire. I am a 70-year-old woman who worked her whole life, who was widowed 10 years ago, and who made the mistake of being too generous with her family. And now I am correcting that mistake. But they are your family, a family that humiliated me publicly, a family that lived for free in my house for 2 years without contributing a cent, a family that treated me like a maid in my own home. That family. The 3 women looked at each other, uncomfortable. "Victoria didn't tell us that," admitted the blonde. "Of course not, because Victoria is an expert at playing the victim. But ask her about the birthday party. Ask her what she said to me in front of 30 people. Ask her how much rent they have paid in 2 years. Ask her how many times she thanked me for supporting them." The silence that followed was revealing. "Look," I said more softly, "I understand you are friends of Victoria and you want to support her. But there are 2 sides to every story, and mine includes 2 years of emotional and economic abuse that I am no longer willing to tolerate." The tall woman stood up. "We are sorry we came. We didn't know. Now you know, and you can leave." I walked them to the door. When they left, I went straight up to Richard and Victoria's room. I knocked hard. Victoria opened. "What do you want?" "I want you to know your friends were here, trying to make me feel guilty, painting me as the villain of this story." "I didn't ask them to come." "No? Then how did they know where to find me? How did they know about the move? Magic?" Victoria didn't answer. "Listen to me well," I said, my voice low but firm. "You can say whatever you want about me. You can paint me as the evil mother-in-law. You can play the victim with whoever you want. But when my grandchildren ask me what happened, I am going to tell them the truth, the complete truth. And then they can decide for themselves who is really the victim here. Are you threatening me? I am warning you. There is a difference." I closed the door before she could answer. My hands were shaking with rage, but also with something else. Satisfaction. Every day that passed, I felt stronger, more master of myself. The night before the move, I prepared a special dinner, not for Richard and Victoria, for my grandchildren. Their favorite meal, pasta with homemade tomato sauce and meatballs. Chocolate cake for dessert. I called them down when it was ready. Liam and Chloe came running down. Richard and Victoria came down slower, surprised. I thought we could have dinner together one last time, I said. For the kids, Richard nodded. Victoria said nothing, but she sat down. We dined in a mostly uncomfortable silence, interrupted only by the excited voices of the children talking about their new house. Liam was excited to have his own room. Chloe wanted to know if she could paint the walls pink. I listened to them, memorizing their voices, their laughter, the way their eyes shone when they spoke, because I knew after tomorrow this would change. I wouldn't see them every day. I wouldn't hear their footsteps on the stairs every morning. The house would be silent, and although that hurt me, I also knew it was necessary. After dinner, I helped the kids bathe for the last time in that house. I read them a story before bed. I kissed their foreheads and told them how much I loved them. "We are going to miss you, Grandma," said Chloe. "And I will miss you, my love. But we are going to see each other soon, I promise." That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake, listening to the sounds of the house. The clock in the living room striking the hours, the wind against the windows, the familiar creaks of the old wood. This house had been my home for 35 years. I had raised my son here. I had loved my husband here. I had grown old here. And tomorrow, it would be just mine again. At 6 in the morning, the moving truck arrived. I watched from my bedroom window as 4 men began loading boxes and furniture. Richard directed the operation. Victoria supervised, making sure nothing was left behind. By 10, the house was almost empty. The rooms Richard, Victoria, and the kids had occupied were stripped of life. Only the marks on the walls where they had hung pictures remained. The dents in the floor where the furniture had been, Richard came to find me. "Everything is done. We're leaving." I went down the stairs. The kids were by the door, with their backpacks on. Chloe had tears in her eyes. Liam was trying to be brave. I knelt in front of them, ignoring the pain in my knees. "I love you both so much. Don't ever forget it. And remember, this will always be your house. You can come whenever you want." "When are you going to visit us?" asked Liam. "Very soon. As soon as you get settled." I hugged them tight, very tight. Chloe sobbed against my shoulder. Liam squeezed my neck with his little arms. Richard had to separate them gently. "Let's go, kids. It's time to go." I watched them walk toward the car. Richard was carrying the last bags. Victoria was already in the driver's seat, looking at her phone, avoiding looking at me even in that last moment. The kids turned one last time to wave goodbye. I waved back, smiling despite the lump in my throat. Richard approached me before getting in the car. For a moment, he seemed to want to say something profound, something meaningful. But in the end, he only said, "Thanks for everything. I know I didn't say it enough during these 2 years. But thank you. Take care of your family, Richard, and take care of yourself." He nodded. I saw something wet in his eyes. Then he turned around and got in the car. The engine started and, in a matter of seconds, they disappeared down the street. I stood in the doorway for a long time. The silence they left behind was deafening. Slowly, I went back inside the house. I closed the door, and for the first time in 2 years, I locked the deadbolt in the middle of the day. I walked through every room, the empty bedrooms. The study Richard had turned into an office, now stripped of his things. The kids' room, without their toys or their laughter. Everything was silent. Everything was empty. I sat on the living room sofa, my sofa, in my living room, in my house, and I cried, not from sadness, not completely. They were tears of liberation, of relief, of grief for what could have been and never was, and of hope for what could come. I cried for half an hour, maybe more, until there were no more tears left. And when I finally dried my eyes, I felt lighter. As if I had let go of a weight I had been carrying for so long, I had forgotten what it was like to walk without it. I grabbed my phone and called Susan. "They're gone," I said when she answered. "How are you?" "Tired, sad, but also free, for the first time in years." "Susan, I feel free. I'm glad. Friend. Do you want me to come over?" "No. I need to be alone today. I need to process all this. I understand. But tomorrow, I'm coming, okay? With wine and food. And we are going to celebrate your new life." I smiled. Sounds perfect. I spent the rest of the day exploring my house as if seeing it for the first time. I opened all the windows, let fresh air in, put on loud music, something I hadn't done in 2 years because there was always someone working from home or kids napping. I danced alone in the living room. I laughed at myself. I poured myself a glass of wine at 3 in the afternoon without feeling guilty. The next day, as promised, Susan arrived with a bottle of red wine and a bag full of Italian food from our favorite restaurant. We sat on the back patio terrace, that space I had neglected for so long because I never had time for myself. So, said Susan, raising her glass, to Eleanor, to her courage, to her dignity, and to her new life. We clinked glasses. You know what the strangest thing is? I said after a sip. For 2 years, I felt like a stranger in my own house. And now that I am alone, I feel more at home than ever. Because this house isn't full of resentment anymore. It isn't full of people who took you for granted. Now it is just full of you. And that is exactly what you needed. She was right. Completely right. The following days were an adjustment. I had to get used to the silence, to cooking for only one person, to not hearing footsteps on the stairs. But with every day that passed, that adjustment felt less like a loss and more like a gain. A week after the move, Richard called me. Mom, the kids want to see you. Can we visit on Sunday? Of course. At what time? 2 is fine. Perfect. Sunday arrived, and with it came my grandchildren. Just them and Richard. Victoria had stayed home, probably because she still couldn't look me in the face. I was glad. The visit would be easier without her toxic presence. The kids came in like whirlwinds, exploring the house as if it were new. And in a way, it was. I had redecorated the sewing room Victoria had used for storage. Now it was a playroom for when they visited me, full of new toys, books, a dollhouse for Chloe, race cars for Liam. Their screams of excitement were worth every penny I spent. Richard looked at me with a guilty expression. You didn't have to do all this. I wanted to. This is their house too. It always will be. We spent the afternoon playing, laughing, eating cookies I had baked that morning. Richard stayed in the background, watching us, and for the first time in a long time, I saw him smile genuinely. Before leaving, while the kids played in the garden, Richard sat with me in the kitchen. How is the job going? I asked. It's hard, exhausting, but it's okay. I like feeling that I am earning my own money, that I am providing for my family. I'm glad. Victoria is adapting too. It's not easy for her. She is used to a certain lifestyle, a lifestyle I financed. I know, he sighed. We are in couples therapy. She still blames you for a lot of things, but the therapist is helping her see her part in all this. I hope it works. For you, for the kids. And you? How are you? I thought about it for a moment. Good. Really good. I am learning to live for myself again. I started painting classes. I signed up for a book club. I am traveling next month to visit my cousin in Europe. Richard's eyes lit up. Europe? Mom, that is wonderful. 70 years and I have never left the continent. It is time to change that. When they left that afternoon, I said goodbye to them at the door. This time without tears. This time with peace. Knowing they would return. Knowing our relationship could heal, but on different terms. On healthier terms. The weeks turned into months. Richard and the kids visited me every other Sunday. Sometimes they stayed over. The relationship with Victoria remained cold, but at least it wasn't hostile anymore. We tolerated each other for the sake of the family. I traveled to Europe. I saw ancient towns. I ate delicious food. I laughed with my cousin until my stomach hurt. I came back tanned, rested, and more alive than I had felt in decades. Susan noticed the change immediately. Look at you. You are radiant. I feel radiant. For the first time in so long, I feel like I am living my life, not the life others expect me to live. And do you regret it? Kicking Richard out. I thought about it honestly. No. It was the best thing I could have done. For me, but also for him. He needed to learn to fend for himself, and he never would have learned if I remained his safety net. 6 months after the eviction, I received a letter. It was from Richard. Handwritten. Mom, it said. It has been 6 months since we moved. 6 months of working hard, of paying our own bills, of being true adults for the first time in a long time. It hasn't been easy. There were nights I didn't know how we were going to make it to the end of the month, but we made it. And something changed in me during this process. I started feeling proud of myself. I started looking in the mirror and seeing a man, not a dependent child. Victoria changed too. She had to change. And our relationship, although it still has problems, is more honest now, more real. All this to say, thank you. I know I didn't understand it then. I know I saw you as the villain, but now I see you gave me the greatest gift you could give me. You forced me to grow up, to be the man I should have been a long time ago. I love you, Mom. And I hope one day I can prove to you that your decision was not in vain. I read the letter 3 times, each time with more tears, but these tears were different. They were tears of pride, of vindication, of maternal love that had finally found the right balance between support and boundaries. I replied with my own letter. Short but sincere. Richard, I always loved you, even when I had to make it harder, especially then. I am proud of the man you are becoming. Keep going. Love, Mom. Today, a year after it all started with that humiliation at the party, I am sitting in my garden, the same garden I had neglected for so long. Now it is full of flowers I planted myself, white roses, sunflowers, lavender. The house behind me is silent, but it is a comfortable silence. It is my silence, my space, my peace. Richard and his family come to visit me regularly. Victoria even talks to me now, although there is still awkwardness between us. But that's okay. Not all relationships need to be close. They just need to be respectful. My grandchildren call me every week. They tell me about school, about their friends, about their dreams. And I listen to them, knowing our relationship didn't break. It just changed. It adapted. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it, if I feel lonely, if I miss having a full house. And my answer is always the same. I prefer to be alone with dignity than accompanied with humiliation, because in the end, that is what I learned. That love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be trampled on. That family is not an excuse for abuse. That generosity without limits is not virtue, it is self-destruction. I learned that at 70 years old, you can still reclaim your life. You can still set boundaries. You can still say no. And that sometimes, the most loving act you can do for someone is to stop rescuing them. My name is Eleanor. I am 71 years old. And this is my house, mine alone, and I have never felt more at peace.